Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to another ISAS event on Ambassador's lecture series. I welcome you all to it, as I do Ambassador Alisher Kurmanov from Uzbekistan. He's going to speak to us today on Uzbekistan and South Asia, a historic partnership. Ambassador Kurmanov was actually born in Afghanistan, where his father was a diplomat. Since then, well, that must be the reason for his family lineage for his interest in diplomacy. He joined the Uzbek Foreign Office in 1991.
Civil service.
Civil service in 1991. Okay, around early 1990s. Having graduated in Oriental Studies and Economics, both from the Tashkent State University and from the University of Tashkent. To those of us who are from South Asia, Tashkent evokes memories. Those of us who are old enough to remember it, not so many left, of easing of tensions between India and Pakistan following the 1965 war, in which the then Foreign Office in Tashkent, because Tashkent also had a Foreign Office of its own. At least protocol duty functions were performed by that ministry in the then Soviet Union. Ambassador Kurmanov has, since joining service, served in London, where he was a trade and economic counselor, and thereafter became in 2011 ambassador to Singapore. He's also concurrently accredited to Australia. He is going to talk to us about the old linkages between Central Asia, his own country, Uzbekistan, and South Asia, and how the current relationship has evolved since then. Many of us who are doing research in ISAS are focused on this region. As of now, currently perhaps largely due to Afghanistan, but nonetheless also there is considerable interest in all kinds of relationship, economic, energy, etc., between Central Asia and South Asia. So it is my great pleasure to give Ambassador Kurmanov the floor.
Thank you, Dr. George. I think I'll have now in 20 minutes in details to give everything that Dr. Johor already described. Yeah, we have chosen this historical partnership simply because probably our past has much more weight rather than our present. I'll try to explain why it is so. So, dear Dr. Choudhury, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, it is a great pleasure for me to be here, and I would like to express my deepest appreciation to Dr. Choudhury and his team in the Institute of South Asian Studies for organizing today's event. Thank you. So, the first thing that I am pleased to note that Uzbekistan enjoys excellent political, economic, cultural ties with South Asian countries. I will not try to give emphasis to one country or the other country because it is South Asia, so I'll be not making emphasis on Pakistan or on India or on other countries. That's why it will be much little bit broader angle. And the story of these excellent relations actually goes back through millennia, and Uzbekistan, like many countries of South Asia, is a cradle of ancient civilization. And not many people know, but our linkages to the region goes back not to the great Mughal Empire, but much earlier. And we are talking about Cushing Empire, which existed from the 1st until the 4th century, with the center located near modern-day Samarkand and being moved by King Kanishka in the 4th century to modern-day India. But the Cushing Empire actually left a deep footprint in the history of world culture. And one of the outcomes was a spread of Buddhism as a mass religion in the region. And if you go to Uzbekistan today, you can see the remnants of this empire. You can see Buddhism excavation, you can see Buddhists, and Japanese and French archaeologists are doing a lot of things of this. Of course, one of those examples of Great Kushing Empire would be the Baminian Buddhas, which unfortunately were destroyed by Taliban, but however, it was the part of the Great Kushing Empire. So if we talk about the historical partnership, we should understand that the DNA of people who have been living in this area was already mixed 2,000 years ago. So the next boost, of course, goes to Great Silk Road. And when we talk about the Great Silk Road, everyone should think about Samarkand, which was the heart of the Great Silk Road. And the caravans that passed the Great Silk Road not only contained many different products from East and West, but also helped to spread the spiritual values, culture, and traditions of many nations. So we had actually a very strong exchange of different religions. Zoroastrianism, Manichaeism, Buddhism, on a later stage, of course, Islam. But that was flow of knowledge, books, of goods, of culture, and many, many things. Maybe not many people know, but the first book, widely spread book about India to Europeans, was written by Uzbek by Abu Rayhan Beruni, who visited India in the 11th century. And his book, Kitab al-Hind, became the first source for Europeans about the region. So then we will skip probably to the Great Mughal Empire, the Timurid dynasty. Then due to the feud between the grand-grandson of the Timurid, the part of the Timurid Empire moved to India. And the Mughal dynasty, which was founded by a great statesman and talented poet Zahir-Din Muhammad Babur, is regarded as a golden age in the history of the Indian continent. And during the time of Babur dynasty, Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan, Indian continent entered an era of economic and cultural prosperity, as evidenced by amazing architecture. The fine example is the famous Taj Mahal, the jewel of India. So if you look into architecture of Taj Mahal, and if you look into architecture of Samarkand, you'll find the many similarities. And you'll be surprised that Taj Mahal was not the first which was dedicated to him, because in Samarkand there is a Bibi Hanum mosque, which was dedicated to the wife of Temur Bey. So the traditions beginning there, architecture is also rather similar. So after 16th century, due to the great geographic discoveries and decline of the Great Silk Road, the relationship started to decline, and it was partly contributed to the so-called big game between the Britain and the Russians. The Russians came in the 19th century to modern-day Uzbekistan. Due to the competition, there was a rather quiet period of time. Then Soviet Union appeared in the world and continued with World War II. But after the World War II, despite the isolation from the other world, Uzbekistan was chosen by the Soviet government to be a bridge between Asian countries, and specifically with the Indian subcontinent. Because we were sort of allowed to have an Indian consulate general in Tashkent, which was always prerogative of the Moscow. Uzbekistan was chosen as a place of the so-called cultural film festival of the countries Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Well, it was a political thing, but for anyone who lived in Tashkent in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was a huge encounter with the culture of Asian nations. I was growing up in the Indian films, which were first shown in Tashkent and then being distributed throughout the whole Soviet Union. And each and everyone knows Raj Kapoor. I don't know how many people now know Raj Kapoor now, but we know all the songs, other things. So that segment was specifically chosen by Soviet authorities knowing that there are very strong historical linkages between Uzbekistan and the region. And as Dr. Choudhury mentioned, the peace accord between India and Pakistan, so-called Tashkent Declaration, was signed in 1966 in the capital of Uzbekistan under the control of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Soviet Union, but however it was signed. We have a street called, named after Lal Bahadur Shastri. The whole story of the peace accord itself is rather interesting. Unfortunately, Lal Bahadur Shastri passed away in the very night when the peace accord was signed, because he was under stress, because it was a very important document. I don't know who was right, but probably India had to make some concession, which he took quite seriously. And he was called by the journalists as a traitor. They shouted at him, so he took it seriously and he passed away in Tashkent. But we respect him. There is a bust of Lal Bahadur Shastri, and even now, if you go, you can see flowers. We respect him. We respect him as a great statesman. So, with the Declaration of Independence of Uzbekistan in 1991, we can say that it was the marking point in the revival of political, economic, and cultural ties with South Asian nations in a full scale. From the first day of independence, Uzbekistan announced that building strong relations with South Asian countries as one of the priorities of its foreign policy. We established our diplomatic relations with India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh in 1992, with Maldives 1994, and with Sri Lanka in 1999. Well, again, we don't have any political differences. We have common political background, common purposes, shared values, and interest in deep underlying Asian sense of respect and affection. Our people have the same similar approach in a majority of global and regional issues. Bilateral relations between our countries are developing on the basis of traditional friendship, mutual trust, and interest. Due to, again, the historical background, our most active cooperation at this stage is with India, with Pakistan, in some aspect with Bangladesh. Specifically last year we have seen a surge of bilateral trade. We know that there is a significant untapped potential for development of cooperation with the rest of the countries of the region. We maintain our political dialogue on different levels, including top-level visits, which serve as a platform for discussing various issues, as well as defining the new spheres of cooperation. Well, what is today's Uzbekistan? Because the confusing part is Uzbekistan, and whoever who hasn't visited the region might very often confuse it with Afghanistan, sometimes with other countries. So we are talking about a very modern secular country with almost 30 million population, political and macroeconomic stability, rich raw material resources, developed infrastructure, advantageous geographic location, and very hard work. We are carrying out wide-scale reform aimed at creating industrial and logistics center in the region, and we are moving towards deeper integration into the global process. We're just 20 years old country which tries its best to become a very integral part of the international community and revive its historical links with many countries. Despite the global financial crisis, Uzbekistan has achieved impressive results in macroeconomic growth. For the last 5 years, Uzbekistan GDP has been growing 8.5%. According to our estimates, Uzbekistan will continue to demonstrate high economic growth, and this year real GDP growth will be 8.4%. Trade and investment cooperation between Uzbekistan and South Asian countries is being facilitated by bilateral agreements on investment promotion and protection, as well as agreements that provide preferential conditions for foreign trade. We have so-called most favored nation regime with India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. We have cooperation with the companies of the region in the fields of textile industry, production of leather materials, food, agriculture, pharmaceutical. We have a very strong cooperation with India in the IT sector. And of course, there is a big portfolio of investment projects from different companies being conducted in Uzbekistan. there is strong current of cultural and humanitarian cooperation, and we see now a very natural flow of people being interested in Uzbekistan. I met the other day an Indian gentleman who married to Uzbek woman, and I asked him, how did you meet her? He said, you know, my sister, she's historian at Delhi University. And she visited Uzbekistan in order to make research on history. It ended up with, I don't know, matchmaking or whatever, but we see very strong interest both in country, in people nowadays, and we are very pleased to see these currents. We have biennial festival in Samarkand, where artists of all Asian countries do participate, and we have artists from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka. There are friendship societies between Uzbekistan and India, and Uzbekistan and Pakistan. So we have all the reasons to be very close to each other. As you rightly mentioned, there is Afghanistan problem, because unlike many countries, we are sort of fortunate and unfortunate. Uzbekistan is double-locked country. That means Uzbekistan or its neighbors have access to open sea. So for us, the only bridge, the only link to the region is through Afghanistan. And that's why we take very seriously the situation in Afghanistan. The stabilization of the situation in Afghanistan is of high priority for Uzbekistan. In resolution of Afghan problem, Uzbekistan adheres to the concept of contact group 6+3 on Afghanistan, proposed by President of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov, at the Bucharest summit of NATO 2008. The aim of this concept is to create a platform where the resolution of Afghan problem can be discussed on a multilateral basis involving 6 neighboring countries: Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Iran and China, United States, Russia and NATO. Well, in our opinion, a peace and stability in Afghanistan can be achieved only through a dialogue and compromise between the warring parties in the country, the direct involvement of the Afghan people in the process itself, as well as the strong support of international community in socio-economic revival of Afghanistan. It will take time while everything will materialize, and Uzbekistan do not want to lose the momentum, and that's why we are deeply involved into many economic projects happening in Uzbekistan. So what we do, we are actively participating in supply of humanitarian goods and non-military cargo to Afghanistan via the Northern Transit Route or Northern Distribution Network. We play an active role in restoring its infrastructure. And today we supply electricity up to Kabul, which is 442 kilometers power transmission line. We supply 150 megawatts. Our railway company conducted a 70 kilometers railway line inside Afghanistan, and this project to be developed further. We hope that this development will certainly help Afghanistan to have basic infrastructure, and it will help to develop manufacturing and trade. So, finger crossed, the Afghanistan issue will be resolved, and then we can, of course, look to a much deeper and much stronger cooperation. Again, if we point out that, as I mentioned, on political sphere, all countries of the region are members of the United Nations, Asian Development Bank, Organization of Islamic Conference, OECD, others. So we can have both bilateral and multilateral ideas and conduct them. We can join our efforts in combating security threats like international terrorism, extremism, religious fundamentalism, drug trafficking, which is a very serious problem, which is getting quite seriously taken in Uzbekistan, I'm sure, in the countries of the region. There are so-called non-traditional security issues wide spectrum from food security to water security. And specifically for us, the water security is a very important issue due to the fact that some countries are trying to conduct huge projects to build a power generating facility using the water of Amudarya and Sirdarya. We see, of course, the huge potential in investment cooperation, and one of the keys to the investment cooperation would be, of course, transport and logistics. So, according to some estimates, about 20 international transport routes cross the territory of Uzbekistan, and the whole trade between Southeast and East Asia and Europe estimated around $400 billion, out of which 20% of this traffic can pass through Uzbekistan. And that creates a significant potential for South Asian countries to access new markets in Europe, and specifically because South Asian countries don't have access to the so-called CIS region, which is Commonwealth of Independent States, which is the whole Central Asia plus Russia plus Ukraine plus other countries. We have a huge number of different projects that involve both Uzbekistan and the countries. And we have an international trans-Afghan transport corridor going from Terminus up to Iranian Port Jambar, with linkages from Afghanistan to Pakistan and further to India. We have old, big again, geo-regional projects like International North-South Transport Corridor, International West Asia Transport Corridor. Recently, Uzbekistan initiated Middle Eastern route, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Oman, Qatar. We have a number of very interesting energy-related projects. But several days ago, it was declared that India and Turkmenistan agreed on the so-called TAPI project on supply of gas from Turkmenistan to India. We have CASA 1000 project on supply electricity from Central Asia to Pakistan and further to India. So there is a big number of different projects which probably just confirms that the relation between South Asian countries, between Central Asia, have a huge potential. And most definitely the time will show which project is viable, which is economic, of course. But the very existence of this project again underlies the importance that we need to move forward. We need to build the linkages much stronger, and it actually opens a huge potential for any player, because countries of Central Asia will get access to the Indian Ocean, will be able to trade Indian subcontinent, South Asian, Southeast Asian countries, and vice versa. Air transportation becoming more and more important part of the new logistical landscape, and today we have a huge transportation hub in Uzbekistan, which is maintained by Hanjin Group, which is foreign airlines. Uzbekistan is simply closer to Europe than any other alternative destination. We are 1,000 kilometers closer to Europe, for example, than Dubai, which is used as a transit route. So air transportation might be one of the other dimensions which countries of the region can explore. Renewable energy becoming more and more important on the map, and 2 years ago, the annual meeting of Board of Governors of Asian Development Bank declared in Tashkent a solar initiative. So the bank foresees to create a solar hub with a center in Tashkent. They already opened a solar research institute in Tashkent, which will be serving all Asian Development Bank countries. Out of 5 countries which will be first to implement project, 3 of those in the region we are discussing now, it's Uzbekistan, Pakistan and India. So these are new dimensions which can be explored in the countries of the region. We experience very, as I mentioned, very huge interest in tourism. Uzbek Airlines are now maintaining 7 flights today. We have a number of flights to Pakistan. Uzbek Airlines is discussing now to open a flight from Mumbai to Uzbekistan. So we see a huge flow of people flying back, from Uzbekistan to the region and vice versa. And that is another dimension of market use. But I think given the fact that we have the very strong cultural links, even if we forget about the current problem of Afghanistan, I think the scientists, the archaeologists, the universities and others, they can cooperate right now. They don't need to wait until there will be an economic fundamental for keeping start having other cooperation. So probably at this stage, the so-called the soft power that, again, the historical partnership which existed throughout the millennia might be started through knowing each other much, much better. Because for us, actually India is still called in Uzbek language Hindustan. So, but we need to understand that it is more diverse region, it's more different. And I think people of the region, South Asian countries, need also to understand a little bit better. Because all countries in Central Asia are quite different, historically different dialects spoken of the same language, different culture, different background. So it offers a very interesting experience. So this is sort of in a nutshell, because again the past probably much richer than the present days, and again, unfortunately the situation in Afghanistan is a major handicap how we can move forward. Hopefully it will get better.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you for that very comprehensive expose on Uzbekistan's, the totality of Uzbekistan's relationship with South Asia. I'll now open the floor for questions and answers, and request you to, as you ask the question or make your comment, identify yourself for the ambassador's sake and also for our own records. The floor is open. Professor Jeffrey?
I'm Robert Jeffrey. I work at ISIS. Could you, I think it's an intimate kind of gathering, could you give your most optimistic expectation for the next 5 years in Afghanistan? If things went well, what would that look like in Afghanistan? For a real improvement that would affect your country. That's not asking you to make a prediction, it's merely asking you to look at it as an optimist.
I think there are not so many people optimistic. This is the problem. So we should be very cautiously optimistic. Unfortunately, the international community was very quick to declare the situations that I'm sure each and every one of you. It is war-torn country, very fractured, different societies. See, northern Afghanistan is mostly populated by Muslim countries, who are traditionally throughout the centuries been farmers. So those who are farmers, they are not interested in war now. And they are usually being traders, being farmers, they can easily reach the consensus. So if we are talking about the other regions, other parts of Afghanistan, those are different tribes, different interests. So it is really very difficult. We really hope that the initiative of our president may help to sort out the problem. And of course the infrastructure building in Afghanistan will help to solve the problem. Because that means trade, that means flow of goods, that means education, that means new jobs and other things. Because then a person in very traditional Islamic society has nothing to do to earn the bread, but he will try to find a future. And the interpretation of religion is another thing, how you will interpret it, how you will use it. And we see a sort of politicization of Islam, which is twisted. So those are very serious concerns. I think the time will show what will happen. But it is definitely through only military actions. I think it was proven throughout the centuries. So it is dialogue, it is discipline, construction, it is deep involvement.
Thank you, Dr. Shanti.
Just to build up on what you've already been talking about is Afghanistan, and I think you very ended with a very ominous note. I see it more positively having gone to the country very often. And I also think that whatever solutions which are imposed by international community has been very external and superficial at a lot of levels. And therefore declaring victory has been, in a way, very much premature. But having said that, your president also had this idea of the 6+3. In Afghanistan, I don't think you need an exclusive solution, but an inclusive solution. When you look at 6+3, there are many more countries which are involved in Afghanistan beyond those 6+3. So is there any way of looking at an inclusive approach which includes countries which are playing a very constructive role? That's one question. The second one is also about understanding how Afghanistan will benefit from economic cooperation in the region. You rightly mentioned the civilizational ties, which is very good because the soft power approach works in a lot of levels. But in real terms, in economic terms of how much difference it's going to make to people on the ground in terms of employment, livelihood opportunities, and building stake among regional countries for cooperation. For instance, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, which is seen as a potential of a win-win situation. Does Uzbekistan see this kind of scenario of building on pipelines and electricity across the region so that people benefit from regional cooperation and countries are forced to cooperate rather than fight each other? And that links me to the last question about regional cooperation and the number of regional organizations which are existing in terms of SCO, the OECD, OIC, and all of these. Which would be the closest to Uzbekistan in terms of actually stabilizing Afghanistan? Would it be the SCO or SAC, which Afghanistan is a member? In terms of SCO, it's an observer. But how do you actually integrate Uzbekistan, Afghanistan into South Asia if you have to benefit from a large market like India and Pakistan, or if you have to have that kind of connectivity and that kind of linkages in terms of infrastructure building that you're talking about?
Wow. So the first question was whether 6+3 open for involvement of other countries. Well, 6+3 was proposed as one of the way of solutions to that problem. It hasn't been institutionalized yet. So I think theoretically, any involvement of any country which might help to solve the Afghan problem would be more than welcome. But first of all, we need to start the process. We need to start the negotiations. We need to support the whole parties. The idea was proposed. The idea is being discussed. Recently, it was discussed by there's a organization of common security, what the KBS called. They asked that the idea actually worth of trying. So let's see how it will start to work. But in general, Uzbekistan is open. Our utmost task is to have a very peaceful Afghanistan, because we have a border with Afghanistan. The situation in Afghanistan is very serious for us. It's a humanitarian crisis, it's narcotics, it's extremism. At the end of the day, 2 million people living there. It's part of our blood too. So I don't see the doors are closed for whoever wants to participate seriously. It's just 6 neighboring countries because they have to, and again 2 other countries because they are strong and again large players, and then NATO because it plays an integral role, and plus people of Afghanistan. But I don't think that the door is closed. So, we need to kickstart the whole idea. We need to start the meetings and other things, and it will be materialized. So regarding the regional projects like TAPI and other things, we already physically supply electricity to Kabul, and our ambition to extend the line and to supply electricity to Pakistan as the next stage. So we are not waiting until the Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan through CASA 1000 will start to be. At the end of the day, they have a shortage of electricity, and they are needing to supply only during the summertime. So we are aggressively developing our energy sector, and one of the reasons why we became part of the Soul Initiative, because we want to generate much more electricity in order to supply to neighbors too. So regarding the participation in gas projects and other things, at the end of the day, we already supply electricity to Europe via Russia, to China through new pipelines being run from Afghanistan. So the moment the pipeline will be launched, and provided our international obligations on gas supply allow us to be part of this project, we definitely will do this. But we see that our internal consumption of gas is rising as well. We are building very huge facilities. We are building with Petronas and Sasso $5 billion facility, which will be convert gas to liquid, so the GTL. We just signed an agreement on financing of $2.5 billion. Gas chemical companies will produce gas polyethylene. We're doing with Singapore and India the same project. So our reserve, provided our reserve will allow us, we will definitely participate in this project because it's economic as well. And about the international organization, probably the biggest involvement we have now with Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We expect the new summit of SCO to be happening next month in China. In some sense, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India are participating as observers. Sri Lanka is a dialogue partner. So probably and again, the main angle of SCO is economic cooperation. Strengthening economic cooperation. And we know that the larger players of SCO, China and Russia, are also interested in peaceful affairs. That's why the president of Afghanistan was always part of the process. So I would say that for the moment for us, it is SCO the organization through which we take steps.
Well, yes.
My name is Tang Li. I am known as a blogger. My question actually revolves around the other country and big player that has a dubious international, which is Iran. How does Uzbekistan play a role, see itself in managing relations with Iran and the rest of the world? What I'm aiming at is that you have a situation now where the Western world sees Iran as a pariah nation. They're trying to slam sanctions on it. On the other hand, you have the South Asian nations led by India, which sees Iran as actually a vital source of energy and doesn't want sanctions put on Iran. So how does Uzbekistan manage this relationship?
So, you know, we are not huge geopolitical power, so that's why we don't try to label any nation. For us, Iran is a very old, very ancient partner. Uzbekistan was part of Persian Empire. Uzbekistan has a huge number of people who still speak Persian language. Iran, for us, one of the major transit routes as well. So we are not part of any pressure or, I would say, making any attempts to influence Iran. Yes, of course, situation with Iran is very concerning. We are following it, we are observing it. But we are not the one who should dictate what the world should do or what Iran should do.
Yes, Didier Chaudet.
I'm also a research fellow at ALSAS. I wanted to ask you a question about the security-related issues coming from northern Afghanistan. We have seen since 2009, 2010 a new rise of the same terrorists that were a problem for Uzbekistan in the 1990s, the Islamic movement of Uzbekistan. They are seen as more and more part of this new Taliban acting in Afghanistan. And we have I've seen in other countries around Uzbekistan, in Kazakhstan less than a year ago, and in Tajikistan since 2009, intrusions coming from northern Afghanistan and disturbing the peace in Central Asia. What is the official Uzbek position towards this new threat? Is there only a national reaction to that? Or is there a desire to work with other states in Central Asia to try to take care of this threat, especially after 2014?
Well, there definitely should be cooperation, of course, because there is as I mentioned, there are serious threats of radicalism, terrorism. And while it is called the Islamic Movement of Uzbekistan, it operates in Fatah. And any infiltration that happened, never been through Uzbekistan border. While we have other political movements. The problem again with Islam, and Uzbekistan played a very significant role in Islamic civilization, being a land of many great scholars. So we should distinguish the religion with the politicization and other things that are happening. So anything related to radicalization, anything related to terrorism is taken very seriously in Uzbekistan. This is our position. We should distinguish the difference between in light of Islam, between the religion of peace and between attempts to overthrow the current regimes, between attempts to create an Islamic Caliphate, and all other ideas which are used by, so many people and so many masterminds for those things. And the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Regional Anti-Terrorism Organization, so-called the Center of Regional Anti-Terrorism, is located in Uzbekistan. There are similar organizations with the CIS, with other countries. We cooperate with many. So we take very seriously. It is really a very serious threat, and we should distinguish between a religion and attempts to change the government, to change the regime. While Uzbekistan is a secular state, and we have more than 100 nations and nationalities, we can easily go to any mosque, to, I don't know, to church, to other places. The tolerance has been existing in our country for thousands of years. We were always very tolerant nation, and that's why any attempt to break this existing harmony, we will always take it quite seriously.
Ambassador, could I ask you a question on the strategic partnership or relationship with Russia? And do you, for example, in your bilateral relationship, also take account of your relationship with other regions, South Asia, for instance, or Afghanistan? Do you discuss bilaterally with Russia your external relationships?
Well, number one, we have strategic relations with India too. So we have strategic relations with a number of countries, but our dialogue with Russia goes, in majority cases, only to our relations with Russia itself. For Uzbekistan, it is not our aim to discuss other countries. We are a middle-sized country which tries to establish very good relations with many countries. We have developed it. So we don't have those very strong political ambitions like some countries. So for us, it's a peaceful development of the region. This, of course, is very serious. Russia has its own interest in India, for example. Russia's interest has nothing to do with Uzbekistan. With their relations, with their companies, with their exports, very often military exports. Nothing is produced in Uzbekistan, so I don't see that we need to discuss it. And we have brilliant relations with India. We have a huge number of high-level visits going from India to Uzbekistan. So we don't think that we should go to discuss in India with someone else. I think it would be
Okay. Any more questions, comments, Madam?
Your Excellency, my name is Chan Mei Li, member of the Friends of Museum in Singapore. I have correct? We enjoyed your country very much and the beautiful architecture in the country. My question is, I noticed there were a lot of Koreans living in your country. Can you enlighten me what is the historical background of that?
The key word is Stalin. So what happened? In Russian Far East, there was always a huge Korean diaspora which lived on the territory of Soviet Union, of Russia and later of Soviet Union. So before the World War II, Stalin was concerned with, in this particular case, with Koreans, while he did to other nations. What he did, he resettled those people who've been living, ethnic Koreans who were living on the Russian territory to Central Asia. So in case there will be any military actions from China, from Japan, the people who were living there will not support them. So out of fear of those actions, he moved Germans to Central Asia, he moved Greeks who've been living in the Black Sea for thousands of years. He moved Chechens, he moved Turks, as well as he moved Koreans. But what happened that, again, Uzbeks are very hospitable people. And Koreans felt in Uzbekistan like at home. So they became very integral part of our society. They learned our language. They've been living in our communities. They've been running their own businesses. And that's why we have very strong Korean diaspora.
Okay. Are there any more questions, comments? If not, I'll conclude by thanking Ambassador Kurmanov for what was an extremely informative discussion on Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan's relationship with India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the other South Asian countries. In fact, he talked of cultural relations. Time was when in the realm of poetry, for instance, it was considered a single unit, and there was a Persian couplet, I think, I forget who it was by, which went in the following manner. I will translate into English. Agar la Turk Shirazi padastar dile mara, bakhale Hindu wash baksham, Samarkand Bakharara, which means for the little bowl of Chico the Beloved, I think I'll give away Samarkand, Bukhara, and Hindustan. But today, of course, these entities are sovereign and would not be so lightly treated as the poet did. And in fact, it's a very complex and interesting relationship that you are involving your country with the neighbors. President Karimov's initiative is something that we take great interest in. In many ways, the gathering in Chicago was a bit like what you would have conceived the 6+3 would have been. I mean, there would be NATO, there would be the 6 countries. I don't think numbers are that important, but philosophically the idea is all those concerned with Afghanistan should meet. I mean, the numbers are changing because it includes all NATO countries as well. And I would assume in some ways other European entities who are not directly related, like Switzerland, who are neither NATO nor European Union. Anyway, so thank you, Ambassador. But before you leave, I will I have a pleasant task of presenting you with a small token of our appreciation on behalf of our publication.